Hello and welcome. My name is Carl Corcoran. I am the course director of the MA in songwriting at the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance here at the University of Limerick. I'm joined today by three guests who between us will contribute to a discussion on lifelong learning. And each of my guests have vast experience and knowledge concerning returning to education beyond the normal age of, well, the typical age of third level education entry from a younger cohort. We have with us my colleague here at the Academy, Dr. Owen Callery. Owen is the course director of the MA in Composition and Creative Practices. We have Owen Grimes and Dominic Taylor, who are both students in the MA in Songwriting here at the Academy and have been under my care and attention for the last 7 months. Is it 7? It is 7 months, yeah. I suppose what we should do really, gentlemen, if I can just give you each a moment or two to introduce yourselves and to tell us what your background is. And I'm going to start with my two students and then come to Owen Callery third in line. So gentlemen, Dominic, will you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Carl. As Carl said, I'm a student. My name is Dominic Taylor, and I'm a student at the Irish World Academy doing the MA in songwriting. And I suppose this conversation is about going back to education. I left school in the 1970s, and all I wanted to do when I finished my Leaving Cert was get out of education. I had a traumatic time, I would say, going through from national school all the way up to the secondary school. I didn't enjoy it. I was always anxious and worried about going to school. And headaches were my favorite way of getting out of going to school. I did my Leaving Cert, very middle of the road results. I wasn't particularly good at any subject, I would say. Maybe geography and a little bit was probably my best subject at the time. But I ran out of the school in 1973, delighted to go, delighted to be away. Not that we were offered an opportunity to go to third level. In fact, of all my peers and that year, I think there was only one person who said he was going to NIHE, which is the University of Limerick now. And I don't know if he ever did, never met the guy afterwards. But I know one other person in my class did go to college and became a teacher. So there was no discussion about what are you doing after you've finished your Leaving Cert. It was just, you're on your own. And that suited me, as I said. I didn't want to go on to education. It didn't interest me. So I had a work life then. I did various things, traveled around Europe for a good few years. I worked in the graphic design publishing industry eventually when I came back to Limerick to live. I was involved in publishing then up to the 90s. I was involved in pirate radio, loads of things like that. And it wasn't until 2020, I was made redundant from my last job over the last crash, the financial crash. And out of the blue, I met a guy I knew, and we were just talking, what are you doing? And he said, I'm up in Mary I studying. And he just planted the seed in my head. I said, well, you know what, why not? I was already involved in the literary scene in Limerick for many years before that. So, I had sort of self-educated myself in the world of literature. So I said I'd give it a go, and I did. I was accepted. I got in, really loved it. The first 6 months of it, I thought I wouldn't continue, but I persevered. And I got through the first 6 months, and it was not plain sailing, but I absolutely really enjoyed the next 4 years, 4.5 years that I spent up in Mary I.
And
And
that was doing what, Dominic? What was
I studied media and communications and English. They were my two major subjects, and they were just right up my street. You know, I loved every bit of it, and I got this. I was the top student for media and communications in my year
what?
for that in that year.
Suez Cabarna Ronga. Yeah. Top of the
Yeah,
class.
top
Yeah.
of the class. Yeah. So you know, it really suited me, and
Okay.
I was going to go on. I was invited to do the masters. You know,
Mm.
but you know, I don't know why. I just didn't want to do it. You know, for some reason, I didn't feel I wanted to do it. You know, and I was kind of forcing myself. Some of the lecturers were talking to me, saying, you know, but I couldn't settle on what I was going to do it on. What am I going to do? You know, I'd only be picking something to please them. You
Mm.
know, so I didn't do it.
Okay.
So I went back into my Limerick Writer Centre, start involvement in that, and I started going back to songwriting.
Mhm.
And I started the acoustic club for songwriters in Limerick. And that rekindled in a big way my desire to write songs and to write better songs.
Mm.
And that led me through Patrick Barry, who was one of our songwriters at the Acoustic Club, who studied here last year. He said he was doing it. He had done it. You know, I talked to him and I said, look, I'm going to give it a go, you know.
Okay.
So if I could get it funded, I had to have it funded. I
Mm.
didn't have the money really to pay the fees. So I applied to Susie and they gave me the funding.
Okay.
And
Maybe we'll
that led me here.
excellent. We'll come back to the funding because I think that's important.
Mhm.
So we're up to the present with Dominic. Owen Grimes, tell us a little bit about your experience and your background.
Okay. Um, well, growing up, obviously, music was my passion. Went to school, primary, secondary, and studied music. I didn't perform very well in school for various reasons, but I did like art, music, and languages. They seem to be the things that I just found more natural, easier to do. Um, the 70s, like Dominic, my story is very similar to Dominic. The 70s was a peculiar time. There wasn't much going on in terms of careers and jobs. And I really would have loved to go and, you know, I got into various universities to do art or music and languages, those kind of things. But we had a career guidance counselor at school, Gormeston College, and there was a lot of engagement with him and my father involved as well. And between the two of them, and I don't mean this in any nasty way, but that they conspired that I should become an accountant. That was what they thought was the thing to do. That was the area, the growing area in the 70s. Plenty of jobs in that. So any little dreams I had, that was it. But I mean, it didn't. I understood the reality of the situation, so I never got to do what I'd like to do. So anyway, that I got a job. I worked in a bank for 35 years, and eventually I went to college during my time at work. I did a degree and a master's, and you know, did very well. In 2009, the crash came, and banks became restructured. They were strange places to be in at that time, and you know, my area was marketing and strategy and those kind of things. And really, after 2009, all that the bank was interested in doing was chasing bad debts. So everyone got reassigned into areas that weren't very exciting to do. So there was an offer to jump, and I did it. I took it, and I did a couple of things. I worked for a charity for a few years, and I worked in the Dáil with a couple of TDs doing various things for them for a few years, and then I kind of hung around looking at things. I played in a band, stayed involved on my own in music. I bumped into Carl Corcoran in early 2020, and I got, you know, in wind of what was going on. I couldn't believe there was such a thing as a master's in songwriting. I mean, in my day, you know, that the span of academic possibility was so narrow, and it was just a wonderful thing to see that these things were possible. So I wasn't sure whether I wanted to jump in. I mean, I having been through a master's before, I understand the academic rigor and commitment involved. And I suppose I was intimidated at my stage in life about whether I should do it or not. Anyway, Carl talked me into it, and I still, well, I don't know whether I forgive you or not. I think I do. I've absolutely loved it. It's been a complete revelation for me. It's wonderful. I was very, very anxious about whether, even though I have nothing else to do, but it is a big commitment, and
Sure.
I just wondered whether I would be able to take it on and do it. Just the nature of the course, the fact that it's something that feels very natural to me. I love the subject matter. I love the span of subjects involved. So I just had no problem at all being committing myself to do it, and it's an all day, every day thing with me ever since. Because I just love it. So it's worked out really well, and I'm delighted that I got the opportunity. Pity it wasn't around 30 or 40 years ago. The MA in songwriting, but anyway.
On that subject, I can say that we are the only masters of its kind on this island, and one of a handful on the islands of Ireland and the UK. So, we're still in our growing stages, and it's attracting more and more attention. I'm going to move on to Owen Callery. Owen obviously is a lot younger than the three alphalas that are.
It's just the moisturizer that does this.
On the screen, I mean, the three of us, Owen, Grimes, Dominic, and myself are waiting for the vaccination website to open up, and we'll be one of the first next week. Owen, you also came to education at a later stage.
Yeah, in relative terms, I suppose. So yeah, I left school, would have been in the early 90s. And although obviously things were very, very different, in the performing arts, I was interested in music, was interested in lots of things. Everything was still very, very traditional in terms of particularly music being my area. Things were very much still about a very particular way of teaching classical music. And it just wasn't that interesting to me at the time. And, ironically, after like Owen Grimes, I got the points to go to DIT. So I went and did accountancy, and I was bored out of my mind very quickly. That didn't have anything for me. So I went off and did other things, and I worked every manner of job that I could do. And just, I don't know, I felt sort of slightly incomplete. And I was doing a bit of a sound engineering course one time. And one of the people there had been a mature student. So he went back at the age, he was a bit older than me, and he went back sort of 29, 30. And he said, oh, you should try that. And he said, and you should definitely go to UCC in Cork. At the time, Micheál O'Sullivan, who subsequently came to the Academy, obviously had set up this completely different way of doing things within the context of music education in Ireland at third level. And so I applied then. I was 26 at the time, decided to go back to school and to actually pursue music. And I wasn't so much interested in pursuing music for the sake of my own practice or doing things. I just wanted to know more about it. And, the rest is history. It completely changed my life. I ended up in the US for about 12 years. I did my master's there, did my PhD there. And then came back to Limerick, September 2019 to start teaching at the Academy. So I lead the MA in Composition and Creative Music Practice, which again would be kind of, as my own interests were, very eclectic. We look at a lot of different types of traditions, different types of ways of making music, Western, non-Western, from different eras. And it was really that kind of trying to think about how is it that people use music to live their life? What does studying music tell us about the rest of humanity, about how they engage in their daily activities? And when we have that impulse to create, how does that relate to our daily activities? How does that inform our culture? How does our culture inform our practices? And really that's what I've been doing for the last, now trying to count, many years since that fateful decision to actually go back into education. I was like a lot of younger people who, what was I thinking, trying to make a decision at 17 or 18 to go into a university or go into a college, as the case was at me. I had no interest in it. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I would love if we say that that's actually okay and you should go off and do something else and make it possible for people to come back that little bit later when, again, I didn't have a great plan, but I did have a particular hunger, and it was the institutional context that allowed me to kind of follow those interests and feed that hunger.
Okay. Well, thank you, Owen. Interestingly, my own experience, and I'll give a brief one on that, because I too came to education not straight out of school. Owen Grimes mentioned Gormanston College there. I was in Gormanston also a couple of years ahead of Owen, and straight out of leaving cert, I entered the Franciscans and spent a year in the novitiate in Killarney. Decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. Came out, and my parents, as many of us can recall, I'm sure, insisted that I get the steady job, and I entered the bank. So I spent a year in the bank, and again, being frustrated and unfulfilled, I begged to be released from the bank and to do third level education. And again, at the behest of my parents, they insisted that if I was going to leave a steady job like the bank to go to university, I wasn't going to do music because that's what I wanted to do, but I would have to do something with a prospect of a decent living, and that was law, to be a solicitor. And I had a kind of an interest in that area, so it wasn't completely divorced from what I wanted out of life. But I started the BCL in UCD, and I did 3.5 years of a four-year degree program. But the fourth year, I was completely distracted because I got opportunities in the music business, because I pursued music anyway as a passion and as a hobby. And then that hobby turned into an opportunity, and I was signed to a record label, and off we go for the next 4 years. And my BCL was thrown by the wayside. So that was my first experience to education. Fast forward to 2005. Having returned from 20 years in America, I got into broadcasting here. But while in broadcasting, I felt that I wanted to do something that was challenging to the grey matter. And I had a conversation with the previously mentioned Micheál O'Sullivan, who is a huge inspiration in my life, and I regard as a mentor. And he convinced me, and literally it was convincing, because I went into his office that day for a chat about, what are the possibilities, or what can I do with my music? And I walked out of the office, signed up to do the MA in community music, not even knowing what community music was at the time. So there I was, in 2005, I was a 53-year-old man coming back to education in an environment that was decidedly young, which it brings me back to my students, Dominic and Owen, because I remember going to college, even when I went back to do law after 2 years out of school, one in the bank, one in the Franciscans, that I felt different to anybody else on campus, even though the kids in my year were only 2 years younger for the most part. So, and then when I did the community music, I was definitely older than anybody around, certainly in my class. So the same would apply to you, gentlemen, coming in to do the songwriters course. There's three people in our class that are in their 20s. Was that in any way uncomfortable?
I didn't find it uncomfortable myself, because I'd already done that above in Mary I.
Okay.
But there's always people there your own age as well. You're not totally on your own. And I suppose what we have missed over COVID is that interaction with these people, which, I found that myself up when I was up in Mary I, that having the younger people around was great as well, And but we do kind of stick together to our own age group even then. So it wasn't that intimidating by any means.
Okay. And Owen Grimes, did you find that in any way uncomfortable?
I think I would have been very self-conscious about it. I suppose I wouldn't let myself feel too uncomfortable. But again, as Dominic says, doing everything by Zoom and remotely and not engaging and integrating in the culture, I haven't really been exposed to the differential as much as I might have been. So that probably has made it accidentally easier.
Yeah. So you're not mingling on campus with the younger cohort. We're missing all of that. Yeah. But, But even if we had it, I think that there is a comfort in UL, particularly because I think there is this mix of cohorts of age groups. So, you might feel uncomfortable at the beginning, but then you'd settle into it. But like even when I look back on the first semester that we've just finished, or this autumn semester, when we had a couple of weeks on campus, there were times when you were collaborating with 22, 23-year-old, which was part of the intention, was to bridge the gap, so to speak. Was that in any way uncomfortable?
I think that music is a funny thing. I mean, what age is Mick Jagger? I mean, it seems to be a kind of an ageless thing. I mean, art is a slightly different area, and people possibly have a different way of looking at each other within the discipline. You kind of feel like, well, okay, so I am Willie Nelson sitting in the corner of the canteen, but so what? I don't think anyone would mind that. There's a different kind of a it has a different kind of an aura, so maybe that kind of helps. It's quite acceptable to be an older musician.
I think if anything, I think it was the other way around. I think the younger people felt more intimidated, I think, dealing with us.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah.
Owen Callery, do you have a wide age group in your current cohort?
Yeah, and we have a wide range of experience as well. I think in terms of, we've got people who are successful in terms of they run their own business related to music. They have a professional record in music versus other people who are coming relatively straight from a bachelor's degree. And so I think it's like most situations, we all think that everybody else is looking at us in a particular way, or like we have an image that we're like, oh, I feel like the odd one out, but of course everybody else in the room is thinking the exact same thing, whatever stage of life that they happen to be at. So I've definitely, like, we have, you're talking 20 years kind of distance between our youngest and our oldest student. It's quite but it's funny how they relate to each other and get on. How we, there's an energy level, I think, if from the younger crowd that helps support people who are a bit older, and then there's the experience level from people who have gone through and done so many things, and their terms of reference, their musical references, as you're saying, like, talk about a songwriter course, and you have Dominic and Owen, they're like, just like, I remember when X, Y, or Z came out, actually I know about how this thing is put together. People who just haven't experienced that. So no matter who you are, you're bringing something into the room. The job for the instructors and for the institutions is to allow that to, as you say, mingle and collaborate so that we get the best from everybody.
There's a kind of a societal change too. I think that when I was young, people of the age I am now were very different. They were adults and you were a child, and there was a parent-child relationship and perception. I think that has been taken out of society. I think that kids and parents relate in different ways now. Young people and older people relate in different ways. And I always noticed that when I went to America first, and you go to a bar and there'd be people, maybe 30 or 40 years age difference, and they'd be sitting all around together, drinking and laughing, and they'd all be wearing denim jackets and jeans and stuff. The differential has changed psychologically, I think, between old and you would probably, we carry the baggage of a perception that was different back then.
We've dispelled all that, even in the songwriting course, with a 40-year gap between the youngest and the oldest. So I mean, I think that's remarkable. So briefly, the notion, as you mentioned, Dominic, earlier, about funding, and that's an important element. To kind of let's talk about that for a moment. Susie, was your route?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have qualified last year, or the last, whatever the last course was, because when I retired, I reached the age of 66. I automatically seemed to qualify for it. So I was just, it was the right timing for me.
Okay.
So I mean, that's how I got through, got into it. I don't think I would have paid out €8,000. Is it 8,000 per semester? Yeah.
No. The fee is, I think, 4,000 for the year.
For the year?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought, well,
It's around 5.5, I think.
Oh, 5.5.
I think
Yeah.
it is, yeah. I
Mhm.
didn't qualify for Susie because I already had a master's degree, and they won't give you money for
second one. Yeah.
you have to be going up the ladder to qualify. So this is
Yeah.
coming out of my pension, but it's well worth it.
Okay.
I was happy to do it.
Excellent. 5.5 grand worth every penny of it.
There you go. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cheap at half
worth
the
every
price.
penny. Yeah, cheap at half the
It's
price.
a shame if it stops people though from doing it. You know, about my own work in the Limerick Writers Centre, I constantly try to provide things free. I know people say don't give it free, they won't appreciate it, but I still would rather people come in and experience something rather than sort of put a price on it and
Sure.
have them not come in. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, there are certainly some scholarship opportunities in the academy and in other places too, and from the philanthropic community. And so one has to be creative. One can be creative, and you know, my advice to people when they ask me is, for the assistance, I guide them as best I can to where I think opportunities are available, and then it's really up to them to go and seek out other opportunities, and there are.
I think it is, anybody considering it, it's worth having a chat with the various access offices on campus. It's worth having a chat depending on the area. And I've had students got reasonable funding from local authorities for specifically for and it didn't really matter what stage of life they were, but because they were moving into a particular artistic practice, they were considered as worthy of support as an emerging kind of voice, even though they were actually a little bit older than the rest of the classroom. So there is a lot of things out there, little bits of pots things that can be picked up. It's definitely worth having a chat with the admissions office and as well. Also reaching out, particularly at UL, the postgrad, which is unusual, the postgrad student union is actually very well organized, and again they can point to a lot of information that is worth checking out.
Okay.
That's not always the case at a lot of universities. The postgrad student union is kind of like, wow, we have one of those, but actually here it's, yeah, they have well organized, well functional.
So yay for UL. Okay, we're going to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much. All the information about Owen's course is available where all the information on my course is available, and that's irishworldacademy.ie. And thank you, fellow sexagenarians, Owen Grimes, Dominic Taylor, myself, and to the young fella in the group.
The whippersnapper.
Well,
Thanks a lot, guys.
Well, hopefully if you don't come and study